London Nards Vlog.
Nards Vlog, yan, support po natin. London Nards Vlog, more power.
Central London. And the Princess Royal will be joining her brother, the King, back at Buckingham Palace. And my colleague Sonali Shah has been witnessing the events there.
More broad nation, and of course they're a family who are grieving.
Yes.
And I think having to fulfil that double function of very public face of the nation, but also a family grieving, is tremendously difficult. And I think people realise that, and it's a very powerful scene.
Major General Christopher Giga, we know that you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and we hope it goes well for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And Major General Sir Sebastian Roberts, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us as well. So the cortege is making its way towards Buckingham Palace. It's making steady progress, and once it arrives at the palace, the Queen's body will be at rest in what's called the Bow Room, which is one of those rooms overlooking the gardens. It's a bright, light room in daytime, and it's a room that is normally used by the monarch, and the Queen used to use it very frequently when she was welcoming foreign leaders or having lunch with some foreign leaders. So it's a room that the Queen would have known very well. And that is where the coffin will be left overnight. And then tomorrow afternoon will be the procession that we've been talking about with our two military guests just now. And that will make its way from Buckingham Palace along the Mall over to Horse Guards Parade and along Whitehall, steadily down to Parliament Square, into New Palace Yard, and then it will be welcomed by religious leaders at Westminster Hall. There will be a short service, and then there'll be close members of the royal family in attendance, and they will be observing silence and a short vigil. Parliamentarians will be looking for their opportunity to file past, given that this is all happening in the Palace of Westminster, in the most ancient part of the palace. And then the members of the public who've been queuing, some of them we think within a few days will have been queuing for 24 hours, possibly more. Judging by the response already and people's determination to show respect and to show affection and to show their grief, but to show their gratitude as well, for all those reasons. And the sense of saying goodbye to a monarch who's served the longest period in the history of the monarchy in these islands. It is a remarkable thing. And people want to be part of that story, understandably. So that's what's coming up in the next few days. And the lying in state will be going on day and night until 6:30 on Monday morning. And that is the day, of course, of the state funeral itself, when again we expect an event on a scale that most people haven't seen before, certainly in the United Kingdom. The Queen Mother's funeral was, of course, a major and an important event, as was the funeral of the Princess of Wales. But this is the funeral of a monarch. It's different, and the scale will be different, and the effect on people, judging by what we've seen so far, will be different. So as we stay with these images and as we follow the state hearse on its way to central London, let me introduce my guests as we look at the images. We have India Hicks, who's kindly joined us. We have Claire Balding, who's kindly joined us, and we have Robert Hartman, George VI's death.
Sa di nababala pa din nagkukuha lang.
In line with the principles.
Sa to kaya mangit-ngit ta so helicopter.
Di na
There's
kaya.
something very moving about
No,
that.
helicopter naman. Pero ato
So they're within reach, I think, and there's an expectation here in the crowd. Lots of umbrellas
We're
out,
so glad, you know,
say,
na
can't blame people for that. It's not raining as heavily
napalupad
as
ko
it
sa
was
drone
earlier,
ko.
but there's a vast crowd now gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and I'm just sensing a silence. I'm sensing an air of expectation, the solemnity. There's a tranquility to it, which is something you're not used to. I think we all know this, Robert, don't we, when we're normally here for the birthday parade or an event of celebration.
Or just changing the guard. I mean,
Yes.
you know, there's always a sense of sort of excitement, anticipation, commotion, and now there is this great solemnity. I think it's very touching. The Queen's coffin is just about, you mentioned her birthplace at Bruton Street, just up the road, and
Very early age, she was that person. She was the one to lead.
Well, that leadership manifested itself very clearly over a very long reign. Leadership often given in a very subtle way, in a very understated way. But one got the impression time and again that when a decision was made, that decision was very clear and was conveyed in a very firm way. It had been thought through, it was measured, but it was delivered and taken in a sometimes forceful way, but always a determined way. Here we have the flashing lights and the outriders approaching, I think, quite close to Marble Arch, unless they're now drawing down towards Wellington Arch. The crowd's building up, so getting closer and closer to Buckingham Palace itself.
It's remarkable, isn't it, the great variety of the British weather. We had the rainbows on Thursday, we had the sunshine in Edinburgh this morning and yesterday, and in the rain those lights just sparkling because of the weather, and even more brightly one can see that, especially designed, and again the visibility, even in depth we can see the Royal Standard, we can see the Queen,
she would always make a point, even driving at night when she must have been terribly tired after some state occasion, she would always make sure the light was on in the car, not because she was a show-off at all, it's because she knew people had come out, they expected to see her. Visibility, I have to be seen to be believed.
It's the ancient tradition of monarchy, which is that you have to be seen.
and therefore the bright colours worn at Royal Ascot, for example, or at any trooping the colour at any official event.
It's extraordinary to think how much the world has changed in all terms. You were talking about technology. Again, I keep referencing my mother because she really is the one who was there so close to the Queen, especially when that moment she actually became Queen. And they needed to make their way back to England, and the world's press had already descended on Nairobi Airport by the time the then Princess Elizabeth arrived, and the world's press put their cameras on the floor, on the ground, as a sign of respect for the Queen in mourning, and no one took a photograph of her. Imagine now.
Well, I rather wish, I have to say, that tradition were being followed now, because I do think that there must be a respect, and it's not to blame people. I think so many people now have grown up with an iPhone attached to their hand, and that filming something makes it real. No, witnessing makes it real.
Well, I have to say that in Edinburgh it was very firmly laid down there will be no iPhones in photography at the vigil of the Lion and State, and I'm sure that would be the same here.
And it was adhered to very faithfully.
I mean, everybody.
There was no
everyone behaved
issue at all.
impeccably, yes.
No.
It's coming down Park Lane, coming up to Hyde Park Corner, I think.
So we can see a big police presence there as we come to the southern end of Park Lane, and very soon they'll be turning over to the left and then on the approach to Constitution Hill. going to the palace itself. Journey the Queen made probably thousands of times in her long life. And as we wait for the state hearse to come on to the final approach here to Buckingham Palace, we just reflect as well on the fact that we have family members inside the palace who are waiting. They're waiting for the arrival principally of their mother's body. This is Charles and Anne. Not sure, Robert, at this point where Duke of York or Earl of Wessex are, whether they're there as well. They may well be.
I think during the course of the evening, this is the family's last chance to have that private farewell. We would expect the family, obviously, to stand vigil in Westminster Hall, but tonight is the nearest. And here, of course, they're now in, I suppose, what you would call the home straight.
The final furlong. And the Princess Royal, obviously, following statement, wasn't it, that was released from the Princess Royal at 7 o'clock?
Yes, heartfelt and timed in a very deliberate way for the return to London. Princess Royal waited. Here at Buckingham Palace, the outriders have just gone past. And there's silence here as the state hearse approaches. And Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, turns to Buckingham Palace one last time. The final return to Buckingham Palace coffin of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has been brought back from Scotland, from Balmoral, flown from Edinburgh to London, driven from RAF Northolt to Buckingham Palace, where it will lie at rest overnight in the bow room of the palace, and then tomorrow afternoon will be taken in a formal procession, a state procession, from the palace to Westminster Hall, the ancient precinct of the Palace of Westminster, where a body will lie in state for 4 days and nights until the state funeral takes place on Monday. And the vast crowd here, which has waited patiently in the rain and in the wind, rain has just about held off now. Some people beginning to disperse, but lots of people cheering when the status arrived. They just wanted to show their appreciation and their admiration. So while some stood in silence, others wanted to express a different emotion. And that is the nature of the event. That's the nature of what is going on. It's a mix of sadness, and it's a mix of gratitude and celebration too. So that is the scene at 7 minutes past 8 at Buckingham Palace. The King and the Queen Consort, other members of the royal family, are inside, and they are there to welcome back the body of Queen Elizabeth II, which will lie at rest overnight in their